Welcome, everyone.
Hey,
ZLS 024, Brandon. What's up, man?
hey, I'm on the other side of the stream now.
Nice. Well, this is the thing about StreamYard is I can't switch the order. Like every graphic I do has me on the right hand side, and then I come in here and I kick myself on the right hand side. I'm always
Yep.
on the left. What are you gonna do? I also can't flip my camera. Uh,
It's
oh well,
fine.
it's fine. It's fine. So, Brandon, I remember when I first found out you were coming on to Narwhal. I was so
Hmm.
excited. I think Wes had just come on to Narwhal a little bit before that, and I was like, yes, all the NgRx folk are coming over. I was super excited for that. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
any
was excited about joining the team, and that excitement is still there even today.
nice, man. So maybe can we talk about this? What's your role on NgRx? You're a core team member. How does that look?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a core team member on the NgRx project. I'll give my elevator pitch where we build reactive libraries for Angular. Um, I have self-appointed myself the maintainer of the project, uh, but that really means that I stay up late. Well, not maybe not as much anymore, but I stay up late. I look at issues, try to get other people help on the project, and probably one of the people, at least the people on the core team, we're thinking about the project basically when no one else is, for how people can use it and how people can onboard easier and get along with the project. So that's my spiel about my role on the team.
Nice, man. Well, cool. Thank you for protecting our commons. That's pretty awesome of you. I think open source stuff in general is just like one of the crowning achievements of humanity. Like it have this incredible value that's just like out there for everyone to use, and it's
Hmm.
given completely out of like really free will from just like randomly really skilled individuals.
Hmm.
It's it's really neat.
I always wanted to. I mean, of course, haven't always been a maintainer and a contributor, but uh, I always wanted to contribute back to open source, uh, even before I actually knew what that all meant. But just the idea of being able to contribute code and help other people's projects was always something that was intriguing to me. So,
Nice, man. Do you mind if I ask, how did you get involved in open source? Like, what was your first encounter? Do you
uh,
remember your first pull request?
yes, and it was rejected, and
Nice.
I'm okay. I'm okay saying that. Yeah, I before I actually, my story is probably similar to a lot of people. Use a lot of open source projects, and then you come across one that you is like popular, like, and they have something out there, and then you want to add something to that project. You're like, hey, I'm going to submit a PR. It's going to be my first one, and it's going to be great. There's going to be confetti coming down from the ceiling, and people are going to lift me up on the shoulders and run me around the room. So you go into your corner with your computer for hours and hours, and you work on some code changes, and then you figure out this is say you already know how to use Git or GitHub, so you go through
Hmm.
that process and you push up your code, you open your PR, and then you say, "Hey, I would like to introduce this change to your code," and it's like, "Hey, that's great, but I don't think we need to do this. Thanks. Close." So
I remember. I remember. Yeah, here's the call. It's their expectation. Yeah, I remember. Just like being like wanting to contribute at some point, but feeling like, do they even want this? Like, thankfully. So I think I remember my first open source contribution was to it was to this Angular project that Thomas Trajan was
Mhm.
managing. It was like the I forget what it was called. It was like setting itself up as like a good example project,
Oh, is
like a
this his
sample.
His
or the
Angular
material starter
material
project.
NgRx
Yeah.
starter thing. Yeah, yeah,
Yep. That's it exactly. Hey, Code Phobia. Thanks for coming by.
yeah. Hey, what's up?
So thankfully his project was like super aimed at trying to get OSS contributors like be their first project, like explained how to do it. I was not familiar with Git at the time, not even GitHub, just not like Git. So like he actually walked me through like doing an interactive freebase and stuff like that. So it was neat. It was a neat little experience, and my purpose for doing it was kind of selfish. Like I wanted to know if I was doing things right. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll submit some code and see if it gets in.
So you're out here experimenting with PRs, is what you're saying.
Hey, it's the place where I was at. I was craving some stuff like that. Like we didn't have PR processes or much engineer to engineer interaction where I was at the time. So it was.
Yeah, I know. I can definitely relate to how that is. Like my part of why I wanted to contribute to open source also before I got actually in it was like it felt like there was a level of acceptance that you gained by contributing to open source. Like you were, it wasn't that you were, it didn't matter like the project or anything like that. It's like if you contributed to open source, that means you were quote unquote worthy of, changing someone else's code, or you're worthy to your code. You write code well enough to be able to submit something to change somebody else's code.
Yeah.
Since I think the impressions of open source I had in the beginning were like the Linux open source project. And it's like, well, you got to be like best of the best to even get a sniff at getting a PR into that project. So that I probably felt like that's how all open source projects were. Like you couldn't just show up and be like, hey, I want to make a text change. And then they'd be like, no, shut up, go away. But like I said, part of it was wanting to be accepted, to say that I've learned enough to be able to contribute back, because I knew how to use Git and stuff like that. So I knew how to go through the process, but still it's like, am I gonna get rejected? Are they gonna reject my PR? And then I'm gonna have to like scurry off back into a corner, which, like I said, my first one got rejected, and it probably bummed me out for a couple of days, but I didn't let that stop me overall from keep trying anyway.
Cool. So how did you get mixed up with NgRx? I believe you and Mike Ryan were at Synapse Labs at the time. Is that right?
Well, me and Mike go back further than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, cool. Mike actually is the one who got me involved in Angular JS back in 2014. I always joke when I'm streaming, somebody says PHP, I'm like, yes, PHP developers unite, because I was a PHP developer, I say, in a former life. So I was a back-end developer. I worked, bounced around a couple of jobs doing PHP back-end work, and this was back when PHP was like the entire stack. It was, you built the app in PHP, and it was responsible for serving up the HTML also. In addition to 13 years, there we go. PHP unites. We're around here forever, and PHP is going to be around forever, at least as far as I know. But yeah, the worked as PHP, did some C# backend stuff, but the job that I had joined Mike on, it was Mike. I'll give a shout out to my AGS buddies, Army Game Studio, Mike, Luke, Sam, who else? Brock. There's a lot of people in there. I can't name everybody. But we had a crew there, and I had joined their team as a PHP backend developer.
Where was this group at?
It's called Army Game Studio. It's actually like the government it was a government contractor job.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, Army Game Studio. Like the Army has a marketing department, and we were like the web side of that marketing department, because they make a video game called America's Army, which still exists today.
It was like a free game they would pass out at high schools to try to get people to enlist, right? I remember that.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
That's awesome. Nicole remembers it too.
We worked on the like the web side of that, where we built like the landing pages, and then we actually built the website for americasarmy.com, which is like the game where you can track your stats and things. And that was like PHP on the back end and AngularJS on the front end. So I started doing AngularJS there, and I had always been interested in AngularJS, but had never gotten any like real world use out of it. I went to the page and I was like, hey, look at this. I can type text and it actually changes on the screen without me having to, this is some old stomping grounds here. Or proving
There's the
grounds.
Logo. I remember this logo. Oh, me and my brother were so excited when we got this.
Yes, we built this thing. It's one of our oldest projects that we worked on. This was a complete rewrite in AngularJS. It's probably nice. I'm gonna say it's probably still in AngularJS today. I don't know what version because it's been a long time since we've been there, but still AngularJS. Yep. So yeah, we built that. Mike was the lead developer on the front end for that one, and so he said, we're doing AngularJS. Would you like to, start doing some AngularJS in addition to doing the backend stuff? I was like, sure. I was interested in it already, so he gave me a chance to start working with it as my job. So that was pretty cool. So then eventually, I moved from doing PHP work to strictly doing front end AngularJS work, and then having to dive into the whole world of more extensive CSS and single page apps and all that. So
it's a whole thing around front end web development, and it's like several very disjointed skill sets. I feel like you got CSS as one thing, you've got like proper semantics. It's like maybe related to CSS, but a whole other thing. And then you've got like the data flow, then you've got your framework. It's all this thing. So
yes, it's definitely a different world than just doing the back end. Because when you're doing back end work, you're just like, I need to make sure that the API is good and that it doesn't crash.
Yeah, I feel like you could just like pass some tests, like let's hit the server. Okay, it came back right. Let's go.
It's like there's like the few rules you have to follow as a backend developer. It's like, make sure your API works, make sure it's like consistent, don't return 200 and errors, make sure like your HTTP codes are correct, and and that thing, and then like leave the front end develop. Make sure you make it work for the front end developers. Those are like the rules that you have to have for being a back end. At least when I was doing it, for being a back end developer.
Did you end up like working on both sides of that divide at all, or did you just go all the way into front end at that time?
I did a mix for a while. I was still doing, some of the PHP work on the back end and some front end work. And then, so I did that probably for like a few months. And then I transitioned over to fully doing the front end work with Mike. Cause I think we had another person who was doing the back end work, and they ended up like leaving to go do something else. So they needed another person for front end work, and they're like, hey, you've already been doing it, in addition to the other stuff. We have enough like people working the back end APIs. Would you like to like transition over to the front end? I was like, sure. So it was, like I said, it was a good opportunity to kind of switch over to something that I had wanted to do anyway.
Nice, man. Very cool. So how do you and Mike go from there to now like doing NgRx stuff, like leading all that stuff?
Yeah. So we did the whole and these things like all kind of play together. We worked at Army Game Studio, and the great part about that job was like we could experiment with like whatever stack we wanted to. Like if we wanted to use AngularJS at the time, if we wanted to go do something else for a project, we could have done that too. They were very flexible about what we were able to do there. So we did a lot in that. We did a lot of experimenting, and before we knew what NgRx was, or that it was a thing that we could, work with, we had built like something similar to NgRx Store internally, which is like a wrapper around, but it was more of a wrapper around Redux, the library itself. It wasn't like an implementation of the Redux pattern. So we had the notion of like using selectors and having a store, but like I said, underneath it was still just a Redux. You were still like creating a store underneath, and we had like wrappers around it for exposing observables, and there were no NgRx effects back then. So we were doing like we were doing back then, like subscribing to observables, like creating a service and like subscribing to all the observables in there. And dispatching those actions from there, which was like similar to what effects does, like at a high level. So yeah, we worked on that internally. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I was going to ask because I'm curious about like when the buy-in to observables came for y'all. Like, was it just like as soon as you saw it, it was like, yes, this is what we needed, or did it take you a while to go from promises to that?
I was on board with it from the beginning. Mike's more the visionary of stuff like that. He's like has always been on like the bleeding edge of looking at new stuff like that. And when he saw it before I did, because he was a little more familiar with it than I was. And then I looked at it because it was based on the app we were building, right? We were building the America's Army app, and we were trying to solve a problem where how data was flowing around. And, in AngularJS, there wasn't a concept of using observables to push data around. It was like you were either like pushing things around on root scope or just using services or things like that. So we started to introduce like RxJS into that app so that we could get some of that push-based data. So I was on board with the concept of using a push-based system very early on, as opposed to using the observables that we had always used before.
There's something about when I saw observables, like when I first saw observables, I think it was just like an introduction to Angular, where they just show the HTTP client and you just subscribe to like a Git, and then you set the property in a component. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But then eventually, hey Jordan, but eventually I got to the point where I was like, wait a second, this could be a whole other thing. And once that connection came to me with the push-based stuff, or actually the declarative piece of it, really being able to declare a property like precisely in one place. That was when I was like, wait, there's something here. There's something here. So it's like this weird gravitational pull that just sucked me in as soon as I started realizing that. So
yeah,
now I can't escape it.
Yeah, it's definitely a mind shift on how we used to think about building things to react to certain things. We used to have to. I would say we had to rely more on AngularJS at that time to like give us the means to notify the system when things change, right? And that was usually like through binding, or two-way data binding was the big magic thing in AngularJS. So you could type into the input box and then have something else bound somewhere else, and they both change as you're doing it. So
and Angular, the banana in a box syntax.
Banana in the box.
Banana in a box. Good old NG model. So I actually thought when I very first Angular project I came in, I was like, well, this is exactly what I need, the NG model. Just like put that in there, and I was like, wait, I gotta like react when like an input here changes, because I want to see if has there been a change. If there's been a change, I want to like highlight this thing. So yeah, I ended up writing my own reactivity all in do check hooks, lifecycle hooks, and it was terrible. It was like really bad.
You mean no one just came down and like kicked open the doors like, hey, what are you doing? Is that NG model? Is that NG model you're using? You should not be doing that.
Where were you, Brandon? I needed you.
We'd already been burned enough times. We were like NG model. You see that? You catch that in code reviews now. It's like, are we using NG model? What is this?
Yeah.
Is this 2006 all over again?
Dang, Brandon. Well, so I thought it was really interesting. This was like a couple months back, maybe. You had me on your show to talk about forms, but the week previous you had Mike on to talk about forms, and Mike said some interesting stuff about NG model and like the template-driven forms, and that they work very well in some situations. I was trying to figure out what he meant by that. I never.
Yeah, I know that there are a few people, there may be more than a few, but I know of at least a few people who use template-driven forms because they just feel like they work better, or they're at least more ergonomic for their needs. I'll go ahead and call one of them out because he won't care, because he knows he has his stance and he will openly state his stance.
Who is it? Who is it?
His name is Ward Bell. You can follow him on Twitter at Ward Bell. He will tell you his love of template-driven forms and how he still uses NG model to use two-way data binding within the context of the form, because he doesn't want to build the form in the template and then go have to build it in the code. So he feels like that's the best. He gets the best of both worlds. He gets NG model, and then he just ships off the result of that object when he's ready to do something with it. So he's kind of he keeps it self-contained, but he will be glad to tell you his love of template-driven forms.
I remember even after going through all that mess of doing stuff in the do check hooks, I still fervently defended the NG model for a while to someone else I was working with at the time, and it was just like, no, it's just simpler this way. Like,
it is. I mean, that I will not argue with. Like, if you're just starting out and you're learning how to do Angular in quotes, and someone gives you NG model and says, this is how you can, bind something to the template and the controller and have both of them stay in sync and not have to worry about observables and all these other things. You're like, hey, sure, that sounds great. But then once you start to scale up, then you kind of run into the pitfalls of why that's there.
Yeah, if you ever get to the point where you like really need some fine-grained control over like when the timing of some of these things are, that's when it starts to burn you. But I don't know how often that really happens. So that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I would say it's probably one of those things that we use this quote a lot. It's like when you're building forms like at scale or something like that, when you run into those types of issues. Actually, I learned that, like I said, a lot of the differences between template-driven forms and reactive forms when I was like working on the docs team, because we had to update like the guides to show the differences between the two and why one is better than the other. And Kara Erickson, who used to be on the Angular team, she was like one of the ones who wrote a lot of that and knew like the system in and out. And she definitely shared a lot of that knowledge. With me.
I remember watching her YouTube videos on forums, or I guess it was from conference talks, but I was like, interesting. Like at first I didn't quite understand. I was like, why would anyone not use template? Going back to that again. This is like previous Zach before I saw the light. And then reactive forms, I was like, okay, now this makes sense. Do you know Kara by any chance?
I don't know her that well personally, but I've talked to her a few times, and like I said, I worked with her when I was working on the docs team, going through the reactive forms rewrite, or the reactive forms docs rewrite. And when I did, we had dinner, like the Angular team had a dinner at NgConf one year, and I sat next to her and we had some fun conversation. So she's definitely a shining star on the Angular team, and I'm sad to see that she's not on the Angular team anymore. But I'm glad she's glad she's still doing well.
Yeah. Well, she seemed incredibly bright and also an incredibly good communicator.
Mm-hmm.
Like her presentations were like textbook.
Plus, she can type really fast without errors, which is
Yeah. I remember. I
rare.
remember from her. She's live coding in this conference thing, and she starts pulling out the multi-cursor. And I was like, wait, how did she do that? That's how I learned to multi-cursor, because everyone in the comments is just like, wait, how did that happen? I didn't know that was the thing, and now I use it all the time. So
yeah, she's flying through the live demos, no errors, typing all the things correctly, and everything's just like falling into place. I'm like, hey, can you teach me like how to do that so that when I go on stage and try to do a live demo, my fingers don't turn into spaghetti or something? Like, teach me how to do that.
I'm a terrible typer. I feel like I think my word count is like it's somewhere at 30 a minute. So.
Hey, well, 30 a minute. Okay,
my partner.
Now we need to have an intervention. 30 words a minute. No.
Do you know yours?
No, I don't. I mean, the last time I checked, I think it was over 100 or something like that. But like I learned how to type before I learned how to code. So I may have had a little more practice there.
Yeah, my partner, my wife is she's at like 120 or something like that, which is like lightning fast. And I was like, when I started coding, I was like, I'm getting kind of good at this. And then she was like, look, I got 120. And then I took the same test and started like 30.
Go through the keyboard game, and it's like, hey, I'm going to go first. It's like, hey, look, I got 30. She's like, good job,
good job, honey.
I'm not going to tell you what I got because it's going to blow yours out of the water.
Yeah. No, she went first, and she was nervous about I will lose this.
Type racer battle. Okay.
She went first, and I was like bragging about how fast I was getting, and she was like, "No, I don't want to see it because you're gonna like beat me." And then I was like 30, and she gets to lord that over me all the time now. So that's great. But Brandon, are you cool transitioning this to maybe talk about the NgRx forms design doc?
Yeah, sure.
Let's throw ourselves over there. Let's see. There we go. Let me get rid of some of the banner. Let me see if I can make this a bit bigger.
Yes, design docs where the arguments happen. Jordan, I see you, Jordan. There's a lot of people been waiting for some NgRx forms. If we even go back to the repo, we got like, I don't know how many years worth of, hey, when the hell are going to do some forms? Can we get some NgRx forms? She was like always up there. And we said, well, we'll do it when we have the bandwidth or when we feel like it's a good time. So we're bringing it up again to see where we're going.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So Brandon had sent me this link a while back, and I was like, I think I had mentioned on one of my past streams from last week, I was just like looking at it. I was like, what can I really do here? I didn't really have any ideas, and then like it was like lightning struck me one of these nights last week. I think it was maybe like Wednesday. So I had some ideas I threw in here. I think maybe background's the best place to start. So let me just put this down. So
I had sent you this link because I wanted you to brain dump some stuff in here because I know that you
I dumped in it, man.
You've done a lot with reactive forms, like you've done a course, so you know the ins and outs and like the pitfalls of the things that you run into. And I think those are the kind of things that we want to like take into consideration if we're going to try to build something that kind of solves those problems. And of course, like, Angular community, Angular team, proper forms library aside, I think it's an interesting project to take up, which is what we've always tried to do is try to build on top of those things that we can make better. So,
yeah. Well, this I think this background section here probably gives my as succinct as I can make it. I think what the prime goals should be. So if you're okay, I'll just read it and then you can respond. Does that sound cool?
Hey, this is your show, Zach. I'm just a guest.
But you're the core member here, Brandon. I'm just the lowly doc editor. But no, I sincerely appreciate you sending me this. But anyways, here we go. So I've spoken in the past about my initial experience learning RxJS, which revolved around heavy use of behavior subjects, and specifically avoiding operators by calling next on a given behavior subject within the subscription of another behavior subject. This mixture of imperative and declarative styles led down a dark path. Even without much complexity in the use case, using this behavior subject approach is analogous to assembling a Rune Goldberg machine. And that's a link to like the OK Go music video. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's like a giant Rune Goldberg machine.
Okay. I'll just interrupt you here. This sounds like you should be an Audible. You should be one of those people who reads Audible books to people. But yes, please continue.
Did I go to a different mode?
Yes, you did.
I read a lot to my kids. I try to be interesting in my voice when I read.
But. Yeah, I could tell. Please continue.
Cool. So making changes or fixes to such a machine requires a heavy cognitive load. I'm looking at comics now and I'm getting like all distracted. Okay, making changes or fixes to such a machine requires a heavy cognitive load on the developer, and simultaneously the developer also loses the fine-grained control over the observable streams that is normally available when using RxJS. I see the majority of the issues with Angular forms is that in its current state, a developer has no choice but to mix imperative, calling set value on a form control, implementing right value in the control value accessor, with declarative when implementing reactive behavior. It's essentially the same as my above behavior subject example, but with no alternative available. I believe that rectifying the situation should be our paramount goal in NgRx/forms. So.
All right, so I have a question for you before we dive in.
Let's do it.
Could that be rectified in the Angular Forms library?
I don't know. I don't know. I think so. Further down in the doc, I lay out some basic ideas on what the API needs to look like. I'm not entirely sure how exactly to implement that API, whether it could be something in Angular Forms itself, or whether it's something we could put in NgRx forms and then like kind of hoist it on top of like control value accessors or something like that to make it interop with a lot of the existing code. Let me see if I can jump down to a little bit of the prototype I wrote out here.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead if you weren't ready to get there. I was just asking the question.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. This is all half baked, Brandon, still. So
that's fine. This is where we're going to hash those things out. So yeah. Cool,
man. All right. So I think at the core is there would be this private observable of the DOM value, which we'd be able to type, obviously, and
types. Nope, we don't want it. Nope. We putting any's on everything. Is what I'm just saying. And then Alex will bust through the wall and throw more types.
No.
Throw more types at everyone.
There you go.
Because we need some types. Yeah. I'm just
kidding. So much of NgRx is revolved around being really well type safe. That's like a legacy y'all have built in from the start. So definitely want to try to maintain that. But the idea is
we got to lean into the TypeScript, so it gives us some benefits.
Yeah, it definitely does. But the idea for this DOM value is it would be essentially an observable of events when a user would interact with our form, as opposed to when us as a developer or us as the people running the system are purposely changing that form like programmatically. So the idea would be, given that we have this observable, we'd also supply a value operator And the idea is somehow we define this, and we can bring in any observables, any other observables we want, including, the observable of the DOM value itself. We'd say, based on these other observables, this is how I want to take that original DOM value and morph it to be our programmatic value, which is going to go through and update the DOM value when we need to. And I imagine there's probably like either some flag or something there to let us know, was this programmatically done or was this the user doing it? So we could have like, the idea for this is the developer defines how that value is ever going to change in one spot. And then at the end of this, after supplying this value operator, somewhere up a level, when this form gets consumed, we'd expose a value observable, a read-only observable that is just that value as it changes. So that's kind of the concept here. It's very heavy RxJS, which I don't know if that's exactly in line with, or if it's the best experience.
Yeah, I would say it depends. Like we definitely want to have some reactive APIs that people can build on top of, but in the same token, we want to provide enough of those APIs where they don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over when they want just to do something simple, right? We want to provide at least enough API that they can compose and combine their own observables in the way that they want to and build on top of them. So we're more or less giving them one, at least this is how I guess think about it in my mind, is we want to give developers the tools in a reactive way to build things on top of it and not necessarily try to solve the whole puzzle for them. Right. So if it's more, I think, and that falls in line with some of the other libraries that we have in the platform today, is they're more building, more lower level, like building blocks that people can use and do whatever they want to with, what they've always done with them, regardless of what we put in there or not. So I think following that pattern has worked, trying to keep the API surface small and then letting it be flexible enough to let people take advantage of RxJS.
Do you think this concept of the value operator, falls in line with that small API surface?
Yeah, I think so. If that's just the stream of the actual, like the connected value to the connected value that they want to operate on versus what's coming from the DOM, then yeah. Because like I said, at the end of the day, what we don't have today with the reactive forms is a way to get at the other reactive parts that aren't being exposed easily today. You kind of have to hack your way around to get at those things.
Yeah. Well, I just remember it was a fellow Narwhalian. I won't say who they are, but they approached me and they said, "Well, I just want to make it so that when we turn off this checkbox, you set this. I think it was you set this input to disabled. And how do you do that?" And the only answer I could give was, "Well, you got to subscribe to that one value, and then inside of that subscription, you've got to call imperatively disable on that one form." And that's just kind of unfortunate. And I think their response was, "Well, it's called reactive forms, so I thought it would be better than that." I was like,
well,
"No,
yeah,
unfortunately."
And part of, like I said, when I talked to, or when Kara explained the differences to me, she said they're more model driven. They call them reactive forms, but they're more model driven forms.
Yeah, they're attaching an object really to this thing on the DOM. And this object is kind of just like a controller for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, he said you also get a warning. Yes, that is another one of those gotchas. If you try to disable it yourself, you can't do it in the template. You always have to do it in code if you want it to be disabled up front.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. let's see, what was Codephobia's other question here? One of the things I've had to do recently is using a service with a behavior subject because I am dynamically adding form groups based on previous form selections so that validation works well. Any thoughts on how this would handle those types of situations? So the same concept, Codephobia, that I have for value operator here, I have for most of the stuff that the current reactive forms API exposes. So there would be a disabled operator. I don't know if you'd call it a disable or an enable operator. But you would also have a validity operator. I think I explained that down here, which would, the result of that would be an errors observable that you'd receive whenever you would consume it. And we could do the same for touched, enabled here, or submit, or blur. Like these are all things we could potentially use using the same exact pattern. Just saying, here's an operator to define precisely each one of these things, and then just kind of, let the machine run. I'm very cautious about this because there's a lot of complexity that we're dumping on people, a lot of front loading. Like you've got to understand RxJS very well to be able to use this API.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that in the like some of what you've written here, because I'm going to say that you're comfortable with using RxJS and the pattern and how to work your way around there. So coming from that point of view, I think it would be more, I don't know what the right word is, more RxJS centric. Yeah, let's go with that. Cool. RxJS centric, so that you'd have to know a good bit about RxJS to be able to use these as they are today, or at least how you've written them up in the doc here.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to different ways of doing this, either with NgRx store, like the OG was like there's very little, especially if you discount effects, there's like no RxJS code you actually have to write in there, unless you like consume it. But like the building of the store itself, you're writing reducer functions, which are pure functions, and you're writing selectors, which are pure functions, and that's it. I'd be very interested in seeing if there's a way we could do something like that with this. But like I said, sort of in the previous section, I think the biggest piece is right now we just don't have any other way with Angular forms to like truly reactively define stuff.
Yeah, you can only access the things unless, like I said, unless you extend them, or like I said, hack around the edges of them. You have to build your own solution to get at some of those outer pieces that make them easier to use. And I think part of that is because just the way Angular is built, or way developers expect to use Angular, is RxJS is there, but I think they're kind of hedging their bets. I don't want to say that they put words in their mouth, but I think that if they didn't want to use, I think they've built the APIs in a way that if they wanted to move away from RxJS, then they could kind of swap out some of those things and still retain some of that functionality.
Nicole with a very valid point here.
Yes.
It's like reading a rude code routine. Fair enough.
Yes, I agree. And Ben Les talked about that, I think, in an article he wrote a while back about, what is readable RxJS code. And he wished that he would have defined what that actually meant, or what to look for earlier on, before people started like slinging it around everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. Looking at some of Ben's stuff has really changed my mind about a lot of stuff, including like naming observables. So creating your own observables just from like a long pipe, a pipe where you have a lot of operators in there, just to succinctly name things, make it very clear what's happening inside of an observable.pipe, and what each step is doing. So Codephobia says, do you think we will see things like form control, etc., become generics for type safety? Things like get my control.value won't always be any. Yeah. So in the Angular roadmap, I think Angular has this on their roadmap to make forms type safe. I imagine this is how they would do it with form control becoming generics. You can kind of like bolt your own generic system on top of form controls as is. It's kind of messy, but there's people who have done it. And I haven't looked into NgNeat stuff. I think Brandon, you were on with them earlier today. But
they've done. Yeah, that's exactly what they've done is reactive forms with benefits, which I always get a chuckle out of every time I see it.
So are they just like bolting a generic on top of the existing form control? Is that the kind of okay?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're extending, which I'm sure they're doing stuff other than that, but yeah, in general, they're extending the Angular Forms APIs and attaching the generics on top of them.
Yeah. So yeah, Codephobia, be sure to check that out because it seems really cool. I don't know. I think type safety is the most apparent problem with Angular Forms, but I don't think it's the biggest problem at the root of it. I think just like I said, not being able to define things reactively is the biggest problem right now at the root of everything. So
I would agree with that. Like they said type forms and everybody went, yay. And then some people was like, great,
that's it.
But what about the other stuff that?
Yeah. The roadmap does not say fix Angular Forms. It says add type safety to Angular Forms. And that's it.
Which is going to fix some things, but
that's down the road still.
Yeah.
So, and I honestly, if I were them, I wanted prioritize it. Like with NgNeat already having its stuff, the community's provided that puzzle piece.
Yeah, and maybe they'll look at what what they've done in the NgNeat reactive forms and kind of use that as a template of how to, well, not necessarily bring it in, but see what they did there and maybe build on top. Not bring it. I say bring it over, not bring it in. They'll look at the ideas of what they did on how to make them type safe and not break everyone else. To see how they can do that over time. I think that's probably the approach that they'll take. I don't know, but I'm just kind of speculating there.
Yeah. So is this the right link, Brandon? I'm not sure.
Yes, I think it is. I believe it is.
Good deal. So that might solve a lot of problems, I think. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff. I saw Jan Nicholas Wortman's made some comments on here. He's got some interesting points around things too. I haven't given them a good enough read yet, but we're in on the Discord, and the Discord's pretty active right now. So I'm hoping we can make something happen here.
Yeah, and I think that is probably going to be a good question. It's going to be a good discussion to have and I talked about this when I at least initially opened the design doc. So we could kind of get some ideas in there of, are we just going to extend the current APIs if we can and like build something on top of that? Or are we going to take a fresh approach and see assume there are no reactive forms and what like a reactive forms library look like today? We could do it all over again.
I think the general consensus in in the doc and in the Discord is we really need to provide at least some interop between the existing stuff, because like material is heavily based on that stuff. We can't just like say there's a new forms library in town.
Now we're gonna have Angular material NgRx. Now we won't have that, but if people start using it, then there will definitely have to be a way. That'll probably be like the first issue someone opens, like, how do I use this with material? I already have reactive forms. Like, how can I connect these two things together? So definitely be something that we have to take into account.
So if we go with something like the thing I proposed, I don't think it would be that hard to like say we define a component with this API. It doesn't seem like it would be that hard to implement a control value accessor interface on top of that programmatically. Like we're calling So
Well, I guess let's take a step back.
sure.
What do you do today? I guess I'm not the host, but what do you do
No,
today?
I appreciate you taking charge, Brandon. Let's do it.
What do you do today to connect those two things? Because we gotta start with the problem before we uh, go to how we would use this.
Okay. How do you mean by that? What do we do today
Like if you need to connect the like using control value accessor today, you have to implement that interface and like write programmatically using like callbacks to write value and to get value changes from the parent, I guess. But we want to
Right.
kind of flip that around to where you can have a string to push values into or push validity into, right?
Yes. So the way, let me see if I can bring up a stack blitz. I'm sure I've got some stack blitz. We could maybe look at this, or just do like a control value accessor. Let's see if I have like an
Yeah, because I'll say just in general, I've haven't, like I said, I haven't ironed out a complete thought about this yet, but and I mentioned this in a previous show about now that we have component store out there, maybe we could use that as like the backbone for a forms library to like manage that state part of it to in a reactive way. But there still is that piece that needs to connect the DOM to the control in the form that we want. So that's
yeah,
the part that we still have to, I think, churn on some more to be able
absolutely.
to do that.
And that's the part of my thoughts that are just completely half baked. Like I understand these are the key pieces. How do we attach those? Like whether it's via directives or whether it's via some injectable or whether it's done on the consumer or on the parent. That's a whole other problem. I really don't have good answers for yet.
Yeah, because
But
I talked to another developer. His name escapes me now, but they had built like a homegrown forms library on top of NgRx store, basically, where they bound a lot of they used a lot of template bindings and to basically get the data out of the template and push that data into the store where they operate more or less use that to operate on it to like calculate the validity and things like that. And I think other people have kind of done the same thing to where you kind of defer the responsibility away from the DOM itself as far as validity is concerned, and you push that into a place where you have more flexibility to determine what is the thing touched, has it been blurred, those things. You just use the DOM more as like an input to the state of that thing, and I think that kind of leads, like I said, leads into using component stores like a backbone, because we feed all this. We still need a place to feed like the state of a control. And then from there we can decide like reactively how we want to react to how that thing changes, or how do we push back data across the back to the element itself so that the values are in sync in that part of it. So
yeah, Jordan brings up a really good point here, and this is what I kept thinking as I was staring at this design doc and not knowing what to put in there. Half of the problem is there are a million different ways to implement forms in the first place. That's absolutely true. I'm actually super interested in how other frameworks handle forms, and I'm clueless as to that. So
yeah, I've only looked at the surface on like some other libraries that have done this, or like in React, there's like React forms that are, some of them are like built on top of Redux that implement that same idea. And there's some that are built more on top of like, I think there's JSON forms or something like that. But I think then there was like a Svelte forms library that was like really small, but allowed you to compose forms in that way. But I think the central idea is the same. We try to just use the form itself is like an input to feed some kind of state that we can operate on. And then you, from there, like you can compose those multiple states together into something that you can operate on more easily than you can like in the DOM itself.
Right. Yeah, and I think so you brought up something interesting there with I think you call them JSON defined forms.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is something that came up in our discussion on both the docket and the Discord. I think there's like 2 layers to the forms problem. One is kind of like core functionality, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of the stuff I wrote is trying to help with. I think there's a whole other set of problems that's kind of like form building.
Yeah.
That's like when I think of a JSON form library, or I think like I think B-Man's going to be on my stream on Monday. You're going to show me formally. It looks,
Hey,
that's what it looks like. So
shout out
like
to
that's what formally looks like.
B-Man.
Yeah, he was on your show last week, right?
Yeah.
Dude, he's amazing. Like he did NX Go. He did
Mm-hmm.
he did a whole article series on Nest in NX. I'm super excited to have him on. So
yeah, I mentioned something on Twitter about having a programmer focused version of Twitch, and he's probably already like building. They're going to build it this weekend. He's going to be like, "Hey, everyone, look what I did! I used Go, I used NX and Go, and all these other things." Like, hey, great.
We're gonna get to Monday, and he's gonna send me a link to his new platform. It's gonna be great. I'm excited. But yeah, so let's see. We're running out of time. Let me see if I can just step through this right now. And this is a very simple example using the control value accessor with like a pin. So the idea is we create this smaller form inside. What's Frosty saying?
He came here. Can't find out. He needs some help with some tests, and you're up there streaming.
I'll be there soon, Aaron. I promise. All right. So the idea is we create this like smaller form that's up here. Create your new pin and then confirm it. And we kind of have it in. I'm not great with styles, but I think this is like semantically correct.
Welcome to the club.
for it to be inside this like, what is that? That's like a field set. Yeah, I think I looked this up, and this is like semantically accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So we could just like layer on some new styles later.
Field set. I haven't seen one of those in a while. It's
a thing. It's still. I think it's still the semantic, this correct semantic. Yeah, using a legend tag. Look at that. Anyways, so that's the whole thing. So creating your new pin. The idea is like this is a component. This pin form component is a component that wraps itself up in a way that can be consumed by the Angular Forms library. So we'll see if I go to my app component here. I have this create pin control. If we look at this, this is kind of, where's that utils library coming from? From pin forms / pin utils. Here it is. So it's not very exciting, but you could do something like this where you're essentially creating it's essentially creating a factory function for a certain type of control. And this is where you could really like bolt on top of this control some extra stuff, like value will always be of type T. Your value changes will always be an observable of that type T. So you could do some stuff with this. I'm not right now, but you could. So I'm creating this pin control, which is right there. And then if you look at my HTML, all I'm doing is I'm dropping in the selector for my pin form I created up here. And then I'm using the form control directive to just pass in that form control over. And that is how things kind of work. So it's like at this point, I'm kind of composing with my component, but it's very hectic, for lack of a better word. There's an inner form control here inside the actual form component, and then there's an outer one out here, and I'm like, they're all being kept in sync, so don't worry about it, but also like kind of worry about it.
What I don't love, like I had to do this on a project where I had like, it was a multi-step form, but it was like, and I talked to you about this, it was like a multi-step form
Yeah.
And we had control value accessor, shared components in the mix, and validation had to be on both sides so that if you switch from one part of the wizard to the next, that it would still remain valid. So I was like validating from the outside and validating from the inside and making sure that the control value accessor was receiving the changes and pushing the changes back out. And it was an interesting problem to have, but it was one that I would not want to do all the time.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do. Where I land though is with the current API. I don't see a better way of creating larger forms. Like I think you could try to do stuff where you just have like one form group to rule them all and kind of like do stuff around that. But just the way the API is set up, like if you don't have to react to anything in there, you've got to be calling set value or on the group or on some piece of the group or something like that. And that's just going to be terrible after a while. So
you're more querying than what you want to like to get at the pieces further down in the form.
Yeah. Well, I think when you start doing that, you're like really getting into the Rube Goldberg machine, because like at least if you have the operators, I know Nicole said it looks like a Rube Goldberg machine, but I'd argue it's actually not when you're using our operators. Like you're actually saying exactly this is how this stream of events is going to occur. When you start doing this, where you're like either subscribing to the value or just setting calling set value in multiple places throughout your app, it gets lost so easily. You have to keep track of each one of those places where you're calling set value and be thinking, like adding to your cognitive load, these are all the different times that value could change. And I've got to be able to account for each one of those or each combination of those or each potential sequence of those. After a certain point, if you, by the time you're up to like 4 even set value statements somewhere in your code for the same form control, it's game over. I can't follow that anymore. I'd be like drawing on pen and paper and doing some ridiculous map no one else could ever understand to try to figure it out. But that's kind of where I'm at with this. So I think the for right now using the control value accessor is your best way to like keep things modular, keep things within like your brain's grasp as you're doing some of this stuff. So that's why I always pitch it. And I think we have Narwhal has the course I did with them that describes a lot of the techniques that go along with that. I think you were looking at those, Brandon, when you were looking at this problem. So.
Yeah, I definitely had the code on one side of the screen and the course on the other as I was building out the validation on both sides.
Yeah, the validation gets when you throw in validation there, it's like even this pattern gets a little bit unmanageable. So it's rough, and that but there's just not much better way we can address this. I think with the API we have right now. So I think the thing I propose might help with that, because at least we'll be able to declare observable streams and let people do stuff with that. But I don't know. Let me post this link in chat if anyone's interested. Y'all can jump into Stacklets. It's all open and free. You can kind of take a look at what it would take to do a control value accessor thing. I think this one also does ng validate.
Yep.
Yeah, validator. So validator is a similar thing, but it like does it with the validity half.
Yeah, I would say if anything, I would love to not have to define internal form controls inside of a control value accessor to be able to communicate changes back out.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, like I said, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, the way I imagine it looking, given the stuff I've written up here, is that value observable would kind of be, the idea would be inside of the component itself. Like maybe at the top you'd use like an NgRx let directive to just give us what that value is, and then just use some directive to let things know this is how that value is hooked up to the different places in the form.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is all half baked, so I'm not sure how exactly that would look. But maybe I'll be able to hack at this some more, and we'll be able to see something cool.
Yeah, that's why we're here. We're trying to because this is like what we did with Component Store. We started with the idea, and then we said, okay, these are the things that we want. And then as we went through it, we added more things to it. We changed some things around because of the people that were going to be using it, the developers that were going to use it, had to take that into account. Because like you said, if you make it RxJS centric, then some people are just naturally going to be turned off by it because they don't love RxJS as much as you might. So
yeah,
just things we have to take into consideration.
Absolutely. I think I absolutely agree with that. So we'll see. There's JVL. He was just doing some stuff with I think the kind of the form builder kind of pattern I was talking about before too. I think on his stream yesterday. So
yes,
stuff.
I'll give him a shout.
Oh no,
J Van Allen 93. Check him out on Twitch. I'm throwing out all the plugs. He built some dynamic forms yesterday, and I don't know how long he's gonna be doing that, but it was a fun times. The times when I was hopping in and out.
nice. Josh getting some props, and Jordan taking a shot. I think.
Hey, Jordan wants NgRx forms in the store, and we've always said that is not what we're going to do. We're going to.
I remember there's an NgConf
APIs to let you push the data into a store or wherever you want to do it, but do it reactively.
Nice. Yeah, I remember there was a talk. I don't remember who gave the talk, but at NgConf, you and Mike were coming on right after a library that was being pitched that was like just showing how you could easily take the form. Every time a value changes on the form, you can put it into your store. And you guys were like, actually, you should never do that. And I was like,
that's great, but maybe not. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
The end. Dang. But yeah, everyone go check out J Van Allen's 93's stream in 30 minutes.
He's got 93 Twitch channel. No, just kidding.
There's 92 other J Van Allens, man. He's got to stake it quick before he has to be number 94.
There you go.
So I don't know. I'll try to raid you, J Van Allen. We'll see. We'll see if that works. I don't know. We don't have that many people, but what's mine is yours, my friend. You can have all these folk. 93 new RxJS operators this week.
I think everyone will tell us that we don't need new operators until we need new operators.
No raid is too small. Dang. All right. Well, thanks y'all for coming by, Brandon. Thank you so much for everything you do with NgRx, for stuff you do with OSS, for stuff you do all over the place. Thank you. Humanity thanks you. I thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks you.
And I'm gonna keep doing it no matter what.
Awesome, man. Way to be. Thanks for setting a great example. I want to be more like Brandon Roberts. So thanks for being a good example for me to aspire to. Doing streaming was largely because of you, Brandon. So just seeing what you were doing and seeing, hey, that could be pretty fun.
Yes, I'm trying to get more people on the stream train here.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm on board. Choo choo. All right. Thanks all for showing up. I'll see you next week. Hope y'all have a great weekend. Make sure you check out J Van Allen 93. It's shameless plug. Bye, y'all.
See ya.